Hello, Dear Quest listeners. This is Corey Kupfer here. And our regular listeners may have noticed that we took a week off last week, and that wasn't originally planned. But with everything that happened with George Floyd and the protests and, things that were way more important than to speaking about deals for a week, we decided to take a week off. And one of the things that we're doing with all of our media, whether it's the podcast, whether it was social media, whether it was anything, was making sure that we were making room for voices around the important issues of the day and participating in the Melanated Voices campaign and really looking to provide space for people who were talking, and as were we, about race relations and privilege and police brutality and all of the things that have been raised in these trying times. So we are now back this week. Doesn't mean that we are no longer committed, because I will tell you, this is a hugely important issue for me. People who know me have known that I've been doing race relations work for over 20 years, founded the Conversations About Race Project, I'm in interracial marriage. And, so this is work that we continue to do. And this week, what I wanted to do, though, was come back with the podcast and actually talk about some of the things that are going on and relate some of the things people can be doing and looking out for, actually, and talk about how they do parallel to deals, because after all, this is a deals podcast. But I think it's important to talk about what's happening, but we'll relate the two together. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that, so a lot of people are trying to figure out how they address this, right? And frankly, a lot of white folks are figuring, who are allies, who want to be allies, who have been awakened by this, are trying to figure out, what they should be doing and not be doing, right? Frankly, black folks have been, living this day in, day out, for decades and hundreds of years, and they basically don't have a choice and have been continuing to do this work. So it's waking some other people up, and they're well-meaning, but they don't know what to do. And how do you collaborate? And collaboration and alliances, strategic alliances, joint ventures, deal structures in the business world, and they all require, some collaboration. And there are certainly some parallels here, right? How do you align? How do you support somebody? How do you figure out what the needs are of the other party, other side in a deal? And here, how do you align, especially, let's say, as a white person, as an ally to people of color in general, and certainly, black people in these times? And, one of the things is that I talk about in negotiating very often, that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they don't listen enough, right? They talk way too much. They're thinking about the next thing they want to say. That, trying to make their arguments. And this is definitely a time for listening, especially if you are somebody who is anybody, but certainly if you're a person who's less versed in these issues. I mean, there are two situations in which people talk too much often in negotiating. One is where they have their ego engaged, and that certainly comes up, and you've seen it on social media and all kinds of places in terms of the issues around that have been, come up from the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and you name it, the list of countless incidents that have happened. And a lot of people have opinions, and it's easy to go into your ego around those opinions, like it is easy to go into ego in a negotiation. And that is an area that, if you really want to be effective as opposed to being right, and that's something I talk about all the time, right? Especially with my activist friends, but in business as well. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be effective? And these are the times that need us to be effective. I mean, we should always be effective over right. It's crucial in these times that we're effective. So as opposed to jumping into your opinion, especially if it's an opinion that is not based upon significant life experience, research and education, delving into really understanding a topic, not just intellectually, but emotionally and all that kind of stuff, then really, be careful about bringing our ego into play, which frankly doesn't serve us anywhere, right? It doesn't serve us in negotiations, doesn't serve us in business, and certainly doesn't serve us in a time when there are very difficult and challenging issues that are arising. The second way that talking too much comes up is out of just fear and nervousness, right? In a negotiation, if you are feeling uncomfortable, sometimes you'll talk too much. And it's something I want in the business context. Well, that comes up here as well. Right? People do not know what to do or really what to do. So maybe, or really exactly what to say. So instead of saying nothing and really listening, they just, try to figure it out. And then, they're just putting stuff out there. Now, listen, I want to make a distinction here because especially for us white folks, do your homework, but also do not be afraid. We need to put ourselves in the court, and we need to be willing to make mistakes. All right. Now, there's a difference between just going out there and saying reckless things without having done any significant. I mean, I can give you a list of 50 books I've read, in these areas, not to mention, other kind of media and talking to people and studying. So, I'm not talking about just going out there, but at the same time, a lot of, especially white folks, are afraid, what if I say something wrong? They're well-intentioned. Well, you know what? You got to get on the court and risk, saying something wrong. And listen, in business, it's like that, that too. I mean, if you want to make something happen, you got to put yourself out there. And then there's a concept that I always like called strategic planning in action, where, if you just plan and don't do anything, you don't get anywhere. And if you go out recklessly with no plan, then you run into trouble as well. So you do some work, you do some preparation, you get on the court, you learn, you make some mistakes, you get feedback, and you adjust. The same thing applies here. In addition, when you're doing any kind of collaboration, so whether we're talking about doing a strategic alliance in business or we're talking about how we support, Black folks and the movement, whether you're for supporting Black Lives Matter, whether you are up for supporting your friends, individually and particularly, whether you're up for working in other communities, including, communities of white folks around privilege or anything like that, there's a few things that are important. And that is understanding, right? Understanding where people are coming from. It's super important in business and absolutely crucial here, right? Understanding what the needs of a particular community are. Understanding what, if you happen to be a white person, what Black folks need us to do right now, right? Some of your friends or people might need you to just call and check in on them on how they're doing. Just, hey, how you doing, right? They may not need to hear, all of this stuff that you're trying to show that you're down with the cause. They may just need you as a friend to say, hey, how's it going? You okay? How can I support you or whatever? Also, in terms of any other group, right? If you're talking to your white friends that are struggling with this, maybe, where are they at? Try to figure out where people are at. And then, there's this concept of meeting people where they are and then looking to move them. Now, listen, like in business, with every opportunity or every challenge in business, we all need to decide where we're going to spend our energy and what's going to be effective and efficient. And frankly, I'm doing that with folks that I know. There's thousands of posts on social media that I can respond to in a way where I think that maybe they're off the mark and I can try to make a difference. But I also know that there are certain people in my feeds and in my life, especially like sort of, not close friends who have past friends, that kind of stuff, college people, etc. I've seen it over the years, and I know I'm not going to change their mind. And I know that I'm not going to have a significant effect, and it's basically going to be wasting my energy. Well, it's the same thing. If you're in a negotiation or a deal and it's really not going to go anywhere, as opposed to pounding your head against the wall in all those deals, look for a place where you can be effective. There's a whole other group of people who I know who really are activated right now and are really looking for, and are truly open and just don't know what to do, or they want guidance and they really want to move, all right? And their views are evolving and they're learning and they're open. And those are people that I can make a difference with, right? And the same thing, comes up, right, when you evaluate business opportunities. And, another big piece is this conversation of clarity that I talk about in negotiating and deal making. Right? Absolute that you got to get clarity on exactly what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to you, for example, in a deal. But it also comes down to, I always talk about there's a body of external work on that just to figure out what the market is and the research, et cetera. But a lot of what I focus on, right? A lot of what I focus on is the internal body of work to get that level of clarity that you need to know exactly what's acceptable to you and what's not. Right? And if you really do that work right, you're getting actually to a very deep place of inner truth. Like you're getting to your why on why you're even in that negotiation or looking to do that deal at a very deep level, not just, I'm looking to grow, but what is the why? Why are you looking to grow? Why, and I talk about these examples where you get down to, oh boy, I really want to take care of my family and send my kids to college. You get to that deep why. Well, listen, that why often gets you to a place of, getting to the place of your inner truth and your values and your principles. And one of the things I talk about in deals is that sometimes you get this sense that just something's not aligning. It's just off, right? And you can't even put words to it. And I talk about trusting that because the inner truth, I think, that's really where truth lies, right? And not in the intellect and the mind, but in the gut. It's the same thing here. I mean, even more so in these times, we are called to figure out what we truly stand for, who we are, what we're committed to, where there's a disconnect between our actions, our voice, and our values versus, who we say we are. And, when times of challenge come up like this, we are called, we are tested, right? And it's easy to, to post a meme on Facebook or post a, some sort of post, even if it has some good content. Like, for example, here are some great books to read on white privilege or racism or how to be an ally or anti-racism or whatever it is, right? But I would I would say there's no question in my mind that that's not close to enough in these days, and it never has been. And all of us, no matter, I did a video separate on this talking about how all of us need to do more who are committed to this. Well, if you have any discomfort in what's going on, what happens is there's something deep inside of you that knows that there is something extremely wrong, and there has been. I mean, it's just totally out of alignment with any kind of interconnectedness of humanity, with any kind of connection, with any kind of true spirituality or religion, at its core, as its purest place. I happen to believe, and I've said this, repeatedly, that, we're all one, right? We're all one conscious. My purpose in life is to bring people together across perceived differences so we realize we're all one, right? I believe that that's the fundamental truth. And if you look in any of the spiritual texts, right, from, the Bible to Eastern philosophy, they all, say it in a different way. Whether they talk about interconnectedness of humanity, love your neighbor, we're all, consciousness, whatever you want to say, that's a fundamental underlying principle that I think when people get to the inner truth, they realize. And that applies, certainly I've applied that, in business in various ways, but it obviously applies way more even right now. So that discomfort that you might feel, that disconnect, that feeling that you're not doing enough potentially, the feeling that there's something off is, I think, the disconnect between who we are at the core level, like at the level of universal truth, and who we are being in this lifetime, in this moment, and what we are doing that is consistent or inconsistent with that. So doing that work that I talk about to get clarity, get connected with that inner truth, to align with your values, and making sure that your actions are in accordance with that is absolutely crucial. And those things are true in every part of your life. I mean, it should be true in whether your relationship, is aligned, whether the friends and people you spend time with, align up with your values. And by the way, that's something that's come up a lot now, right? People are finding out that people that they thought were friends have views that not only are no longer acceptable because, listen, we all have people that have different views on certain things, and we might be able to live with their different views on certain issues, okay? On whether it's business issues, economic issues, some political issues, you name it, right? But it gets to a point where there are people, and I've seen this many, many times, right? Many people are struggling with the fact that people they've known for a while, friends of theirs, are so far apart in these times on the things that they truly value that they're struggling with, potentially having to make new decisions on whether they want these people in their lives and how they relate to them and whether they try to work and move them or not. And those kind of alignment issues are absolutely crucial. And, I do the inner work and trust and get to that truth. And I always advocate making the decisions from there. I mean, listen, I have this end of year closing and cleaning exercise that I always talk to people about, where I look at all the people in my life and I see if they align, if they are, energy sucks, if they're just not aligned with my values, if they are, the kind of people I want to be connected with. And, for many years, I would find people at the end of every year, and I would make different decisions about my relationship with them and spending time with them and having them in my life at I don't know, at what level or no level. And nowadays, the last 5+7 years, I don't have anybody on that list at the end because I'm very vigilant during my time, during the year on making those decisions. Well, whether you're evaluating your current business relationships with business partners, listen, I had a partnership that broke up over 5 years ago because ultimately things were not aligned, right? We had different values, different views, different ways to treat people. Well, that evaluation across your life, whether it's about, the suppliers you're dealing with, right? And whether they align with your values. I've seen companies in these times start talking about, hey, we're going to look at even big companies have, maybe done this because they have some internal corporate policies about having a certain number of, minority-owned suppliers, that kind of stuff. But I've seen smaller companies that are doing this, and probably even at a more authentic level, to start saying, wait a second, I'm going to ask some questions of my vendors to see if they align with my values here. And, what are their structures? And how about looking internally at our own people, right? Do we have a diverse workforce? Do we have people in upper management that are diverse? If we say we're committed to this, does our workforce, does our executive teams, do our business partners, do the external folks that we partner with or align with or do business with, or our vendors or, clients align with those values that we have? And that's what's being brought up at this time. And that is an intersection between the business side and what a lot of this in these challenging times is bringing up. How vocal do we want to be? And do we do that on our business pages? Or are we just doing our personal, standing for what we believe in on our personal side? I, for one, many years ago, I used to feel like I had a bunch of different personas. They were all true to, I always feel I was authentic in that I did not put on airs, right? I always try to be true to who I am, but what I did do was compartmentalize. So I had my lawyer persona, which is a true part of who I am, but it was only part of who I am. Then I had my activist persona, right? And then I had, my non-lawyer, just business, and speaker persona, all these different things, right? And probably about, 10 so years ago, and really the last 7 years, I've really worked hard to be able to show up fully as myself in every place that I go. And listen, there's still hesitancy that comes up, right? It's much more comfortable for me to post my strong views on anti-racism and white privilege and standing with people of color generally and with Black folks specifically in this time, and trying to make distinctions between protesters and, who are the majority of peaceful protesters out there, and rioters, which people are trying to collapse, and most of the rioters are opportunists or, people have infiltrated, and some small portion of, angry folks who you got to look at the reason why they're angry, compared to all the peaceful protesters, or when, people are talking about how people should protest. And, and I got to point out that, protests are not supposed to be convenient, and that, most of the protests that we know of, that we care, that we talk about, from the Boston Tea Party, the Gandhi Salt March, to the sit-ins at the Woolworth lunch counters, to Rosa Parks not giving up the seat on the bus, to protesting the LGBTQ community for years and years and years. Many of those, in fact, all of those were illegal, right? They, at some point. And so, that's the nature of protest, right? So I bring that up is that for me, those are things I feel strongly about. And it's certainly a lot easier to post those kind of views on my personal Facebook page than it is, for example, on LinkedIn, or it is to talk about them on this podcast. But I think it's the way you contextualize everything. So, for example, on a podcast about business or on a LinkedIn page, I'm going to tie it back to business because I think there is a tie to business. So more and more and more people are looking at you, where you as a company, where where your brand, if you have a personal brand, where your company, what do you stand for? And people are making decisions on who they do business with, who they do deals with, who they are customers of, who they have vendor relationships with, depending upon whether they align with values. And if you're not aware of that, then there could be, an impact on your business. So these things are not unrelated. So, I have chosen to bring my whole self to every platform that I'm on, including this podcast, and just do it in a way where I try to tailor the content to the platform and make it appropriate, but also, but be myself fully. So I'm not going to hesitate to talk about supporting the peaceful protesters, understanding the challenges that are going on now, taking a stand against the murder of Black men and women by police and by other people, right, in these particular situations where it wasn't right, and taking a stand that, these are not just rogue people, that there is a systematic institutional racism embedded, entrenched, in the core DNA of this country, and that's got to change. And I also benefit from white privilege because of the color of my skin. And I understand that, even though, and by the way, being a man as well, even though, I may not have had other privileges compared to people, and various people might have had even less in terms of, let's say, economic privileges and things like that. But there is, the privilege conversation. So I'm not going to back away from that in conversations, and I'm going to stand for who I am. And listen, here's the thing. when you look at business from a marketing point of view, they always talk about differentiating yourself, right? Not being like everybody else. And the companies that really differentiate themselves, find their unique selling proposition, their value proposition, their differentiator, right, are the ones that really tend to do well. Well, I think there's a step beyond that. And if you look at people who really do great work with marketing, they make sure that that value proposition, that differentiator is not just a marketing scheme. In fact, nowadays, there's just, if you're not authentic, people will smell it. It's not the days of TV advertising anymore. It's the days of putting out authentic content, and people are going to call you on it. So those differentiators have to align with the true values, the true way you operate, right? If you put out a statement saying that you support the Black Lives Matter or Black folks in general or are against police brutality, but then you look at internally and your makeup of your company in terms of ethnic diversity or the treatment of folks in your company doesn't align with that, you're going to get called out on it. So alignment with values, alignment with who you say you are is crucial in these days. And, so frankly, at this point, in my mind, might as well take a position, right? I think it's smart business. I think even more so, it's crucial to our own spiritual, mental, and psychological health, because when we're out of alignment, when we're putting on a mask, when we're squelching who we are, then that's what causes disease. That's what causes stress. That's what causes a lot of problems for us. So, if we want to be healthy and we want to be fully expressed human beings and we want to be whole, and then we have our business be an expression of that, sure, may you have certain people that are not interested in that disagree with you, that are not going to do business with? Absolutely. But you're also going to attract more of the people who do align. So don't be in a place of scarcity. Be willing to stand for who and what you are, and trust that you will be taken care of, because you will. So listen, people are learning who people are in these days, right? This is a litmus test time. It's a litmus test time for us personally in terms of how we're going to make a difference in the world and impact in these trying times. And it's a litmus test for who we are in business as entrepreneurs and leaders of our company. And we are going to be judged not only by history, but by clients, by our employees, and all of that in these times. So there is a definite alignment. Listen, I personally think that taking on these issues just because they're right, just because we're humans, just because it's just unacceptable, innocent people, innocent Black folks to be killed, right? It's unacceptable for a cop to have a knee on somebody's neck, for people to be shot in their bed or while they're running. It's unacceptable. That should be enough. And it's smart business. And if you apply the things that I've taught about how you get to your inner truth to negotiate better and to do deals better, they're going to apply here as well. And this is even a more important context. So, folks, listen, if anybody wants support on these issues, if somebody is, especially, listen, if you are a white person like I am, if you identify white and you really do want to are committed to making a difference and you want to move along that spectrum, but you don't know what to do. I've been on this journey for over 20 years. I keep learning. I still make mistakes. I'm still learning, but there's a lot I've done, a lot I've read, and I'm happy to be a resource to you. A lot I've experienced. I've been blessed to spend a lot of time in communities of color, and specifically in the African-American and African diasporic community. A lot of Black folks, because of the work I do and because of my wife and friends, and they've been generous, really generous in sharing with me and educating me. When I say that, I want to put a big asterisk here, and that is here's the thing. A lot of Black folks are understandably tired about constantly having to educate white folks, especially when, we haven't made the difference that we need to make, and the systematic inherent biases that cause people of color and specifically Black folks, in terms of these specific things that have happened recently, to have to deal with this every single day. So people, in my experiences, that people of color in general, Black people, are super generous with their time and with their willingness to guide you if you have done significant work on your own. If you are not coming to them for something you can read in the book or Google. If you have really, really committed, and not just committed, in words, but have taken actions over time, then, they will help take you even further. So listen, collaboration, alliances, understanding people, getting to your inner truth and values and, and alignment, and then, learning what people are and standing for what you believe in and showing up as your whole self and having your business stand for something. Those are the things that I'm talking about today. Those are the negotiations and deals and work I want you to make with yourself. And those are the kind of alliances that we have an opportunity to do to make a difference in this world right now. And we can align that businesses to be even more powerfully allies. So there's us and there's our business, and we can significantly move the needle here if we all work together. So with that, folks, I will repeat that invitation to be a resource for you if you're really willing to do the work, and then invite you back, obviously, to the DealQuest podcast next week, when we will go back to having guests around, deals in a more typical format. But obviously watch my Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and all the other stuff, because I'm going to continue to be talking about the changes that we need to make in society to move to a better place for all of us. And that will not stop. That is part of my life's work. All right, folks, all the best.